Chapter 1. A Sky-Shattered Silence. The city lights blurred beneath Eleanor Vance's gaze, a kaleidoscope of distant indifference. Her small apartment, perched on the 5th floor of a forgotten building, was a sanctuary of solitude, a fortress built against the echoes of a love that had once promised forever and delivered only ash. A year had passed since the betrayal, a year since she'd locked away the soft, believing girl she used to be, replacing her with a woman who wore cynicism like a favourite scarf, comforting, familiar, and a little itchy. Ellie, as her few friends called her, ran a tiny, struggling bookstore, a haven for lost stories, much like herself. Her days were a quiet rhythm of organising dusty tomes, brewing strong tea, and deflecting the well-meaning pity in the people's eyes. She was kind, yes, inherently so, but her kindness now came with a razor's edge, a warning to those who dared to pierce her carefully constructed shell. She helped anyone who walked into her store, whether they bought a book or just needed a warm corner. But she didn't need anyone. Not anymore. Tonight, the sky was a bruised canvas, heavy with impending rain. Ellie stood by her window, a mug of chamomile tea warming her hands, the scent doing little to soothe the restlessness in her soul. A chill wind rattled the old panes, and she hugged herself, lost in thought. It was then, amidst the city's dull hum and the nascent rumble of thunder, that it happened. A streak of incandescent light, impossibly bright, tore through the inky blackness above, a silent, blazing arrow descending with impossible speed. It wasn't a meteor, too controlled, too deliberate. A soft, almost imperceptible thud followed, not the explosive impact one would expect, but a gentle landing that seemed to ripple through the very air, vibrating in her bones. The building, old and sturdy, seemed to sigh. Curiosity, a spark she thought long extinguished, flickered within her. Grabbing a worn cardigan, she descended the creaking stairs, her heart thrumming an uneasy beat against her ribs. The courtyard, usually a dim expanse of cracked pavement and forgotten flower beds, was bathed in an ethereal glow emanating from a small crater in the centre. As she approached, a silver shimmer caught her eye. Nestled in the freshly disturbed earth, nestled like a misplaced star, was a ring. It wasn't gold or platinum, but a metal she couldn't identify, shimmering with an inner light that pulsed softly, like a sleeping heartbeat. Intricate patterns, unlike any she'd ever seen, coiled around a solitary, dark gem that seemed to absorb and reflect the night simultaneously. It was ancient, magnificent, and profoundly alien. Hesitantly, she reached for it. The metal was cool to the touch, humming faintly. As her fingers closed around it, a jolt, not painful but intensely vibrant, coursed through her arm. Images, fleeting and disjointed, flashed in her mind. Distant stars, a world of unimaginable beauty, a sense of profound loneliness. Then, as quickly as it came, the sensation vanished, leaving only the ring, heavy and potent, in her palm. The light in the crater faded, leaving only the dim glow of the streetlights. She clutched the ring, a peculiar mix of awe and trepidation washing over her. This wasn't just a piece of jewellery, it was something else entirely, something that had fallen from a place beyond human comprehension. The rain finally broke, a sudden deluge that masked the sound of approaching footsteps. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness beneath the old oak tree at the edge of the courtyard. Tall, slender, and utterly soaked, the figure moved with an unnerving grace, despite appearing disoriented. He was a man, she realised, as he stepped into the faint glow of a flickering streetlight. His clothes, though elegant in cut, were ripped and muddied, clinging to a lean frame. His hair, dark and slicked with rain, framed a face that was strikingly handsome, yet etched with a weariness that went beyond mere exhaustion. His eyes, when they finally met hers, were the colour of a stormy sea, deep and unsettling, but held a profound sorrow she recognised instantly, the kind that lingers after a great loss. He looked at her, then at the ring in her hand, and a flicker of something raw and urgent crossed his face. He was utterly silent, his gaze intense, like a predator assessing its prey, or perhaps a lost soul finding a compass point. "Who are you?" Ellie asked, her voice surprisingly steady, despite the tremor in her hands. The rain plastered her hair to her face, mingling with the spray from the downpour. He merely stared, a silent statue under the weeping sky, his lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. He seemed on the verge of collapsing, his shoulders hunched, his formidable presence barely contained by his damaged form. He didn't answer, couldn't, perhaps. There was a desperate vulnerability in his silence that pierced through Ellie's hardened exterior, stirring a forgotten instinct to help. He looked like he had fallen from the sky himself, just as the ring had. A strange, inexplicable connection hummed between them, forged in the sudden chaos of the night. She tightened her grip on the ring, its cold metal now a comforting anchor. The thought of leaving him out in the torrential rain, lost and silent, felt impossible. Chapter 2. A Reluctant Refuge. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the relentless drumming of rain against the courtyard pavement. Eleanor, despite her wariness, found herself taking a step closer. The man, a figure of profound sorrow and unyielding mystery, seemed to sway, a silent testament to his exhaustion. There was no aggression in his posture, only a deep, almost ancient weariness. Her past wounds screamed at her to turn away, to retreat into the safety of her solitude, but the raw vulnerability in his stormy eyes, mirroring a pain she knew all too well, held her captive. It was the same silent plea she often saw in the eyes of stray cats she couldn't resist feeding, or the old books yearning for a new reader. "Are you hurt?" she finally managed, her voice a little softer than she intended. He simply shook his head, a minute tremor running through his frame. His gaze remained fixed on the ring in her hand, a magnetic pull she couldn't ignore. It was as if the ring was a beacon, and he, a ship lost at sea, was drawn inexorably towards it. Ellie sighed, a gust of resignation escaping her lips. "You can't stay out here. You'll catch your death." Her words were gruff, a flimsy shield against the burgeoning compassion. She motioned vaguely towards the building. "Come inside, at least get dry." She didn't wait for a response, simply turned and headed back towards the entrance, expecting him to follow. To her surprise, he did, his footsteps light and almost noiseless on the wet ground, despite his apparent physical distress. Inside her apartment, the air was warm and smelled of old paper and brewing tea. He stood awkwardly by the door, dripping water onto her worn rug, a stark contrast to the cosy, if cluttered, space. He still hadn't spoken a single word. His eyes swept over the room, pausing on the overflowing bookshelves, the mismatched furniture, the single framed photograph of a younger, happier Ellie. There was a subtle intelligence in his gaze, a depth that belied his current dishevelled state. He wasn't just observing, he was analysing. "You can sit," she said, gesturing to the armchair by the window. "I'll get you a towel, and some dry clothes, if I can find anything that fits." She found a stack of old towels and a pair of faded sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt that had belonged to an ex. A pang of old hurt, quickly dismissed. "Here," she said, handing them to him. "There's a bathroom through there. You can clean up." He took the items with a quiet nod, his fingers brushing hers, and a faint electric spark seemed to pass between them. He disappeared into the bathroom, closing the door silently. Ellie busied herself in the tiny kitchen, brewing more tea, her mind racing. Who was this man? Where did he come from? The ring in her pocket felt heavier, warmer, now a secret burden. It was undoubtedly connected to him. Had it been his? Had he fallen from wherever it had come from? The sheer impossibility of it all made her want to laugh, or perhaps scream. When he emerged, wrapped in the oversized clothes, he looked less like a drowned scarecrow and more like a mysterious, albeit troubled, artist. His dark hair was still damp, falling artfully across his forehead. His face, now clean, revealed sharp, aristocratic features, a strong jawline, high cheekbones, and those piercing, sorrowful eyes that seemed to hold the weight of untold centuries. He moved with a quiet dignity, an innate elegance that no amount of torn clothing or exhaustion could completely mask. He didn't look like a vagrant. He looked like a king who had lost his kingdom. "Better?" she asked, offering him a steaming mug of tea. He took it, his fingers long and elegant, and for the first time a small, almost imperceptible nod of thanks. He sank into the armchair, his gaze still drawn to her, though now it held a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher. Gratitude, recognition, perhaps even a hint of wonder. "I'm Eleanor," she said, breaking the silence. "Ellie." He looked at her, his eyes unreadable pools of darkness. Then, slowly, painfully, as if the words were foreign objects in his mouth, he uttered a single syllable. "Lysander." The name was ancient, resonant, a whisper of old magic and forgotten realms. It suited him. "Lysander," she repeated, tasting the unfamiliar sound. "Do you have somewhere to go, Lysander? Family? Friends?" He merely shook his head, his gaze distant, lost. "No," he whispered, his voice a low, melodic rumble. Surprisingly deep. Nothing. He looked utterly alone, profoundly isolated. And in that moment, Eleanor, the woman who had vowed never to let anyone in again, found herself making an impulsive, irrational decision. "All right," she said, picking up a book from a nearby stack, as if discussing the weather. "You can stay here, just for tonight, until we figure things out." She didn't know what they would figure out, but something in Lysander's eyes, a silent, desperate plea, had awakened a long-dormant part of her soul. She knew what it felt like to be lost, truly lost, and even if she couldn't trust him, she couldn't turn him away. Not tonight. The ring, tucked away in her pocket, pulsed a faint, warm rhythm against her thigh. A new chapter had begun, ushered in by a sky-shattered silence and the arrival of a nameless god. Chapter 3. The weight of shared silence. Days bled into a week, then 2. Lysander remained a silent enigma within Eleanor's small apartment, a creature of quiet habits and profound observation. He rarely spoke, offering only monosyllabic answers or eloquent gestures. Yet his presence was not intrusive. Rather, it was like a deepening shadow, a silent anchor in her often turbid thoughts. Ellie, surprisingly, found a strange comfort in his quietude. She was used to solitude, but his was different, a shared silence that felt less lonely than her own. He spent hours by the window, gazing out at the city with an intensity that suggested he was seeing something far beyond the brick and concrete, or perhaps remembering a world utterly alien to it. Nellie watched him, fascinated despite herself. She noticed the small things, the way his fingers, long and elegant, would trace the spines of her books without touching them, as if reading their stories through osmosis. The subtle tremor in his hand when he held a teacup, as if resisting a greater strength within. The way his stormy eyes softened just imperceptibly when she laughed at a particularly bad pun from a customer. He never asked about the ring, though his gaze, often drifted to her pocket, a silent question she knew she couldn't ignore forever. She had hidden it away, feeling its presence even through layers of fabric, its subtle hum a constant reminder of the extraordinary circumstances that had brought him to her door. One evening, as she was meticulously organising her rare editions, a book slipped from the shelf, threatening to crash to the floor. Before she could react, Lysander, who had been across the room, moved with a startling, almost ethereal speed, his hand intercepting the falling tome with effortless grace. His touch was so light, so precise, that the book barely shifted. He handed it back to her, his expression neutral, but his eyes held a fleeting spark of something she couldn't quite place. Ancient reflexes, perhaps. "Thanks," she murmured, a little breathless from his sudden, swift movement. He merely nodded, retreating to his window perch. It was an incident that reinforced her growing suspicion. Lysander was not merely a lost man. There was an elegance to his movements, an innate power held tightly in check that hinted at something far grander, far more dangerous than a simple amnesiac or a destitute wanderer. Her cynical mind tried to rationalize it. A trained athlete, a former soldier, but her gut instinct hummed with a different truth, a fantastical one that she was still too afraid to acknowledge. Despite his quietude, he began to help around the apartment. He noticed the chipped paint, the squeaky door, the leaky faucet, and with surprising skill, often fixed them without a word. He seemed to possess an intuitive understanding of mechanics and structure, a quiet competence that baffled and impressed her. She saw him once, late at night, standing by the window, his head tilted back, his eyes closed, and for a moment the air around him seemed to shimmer, a faint, iridescent glow emanating from his skin. She blinked, and it was gone, leaving her to question if it had been a trick of the moonlight or her sleep-deprived imagination. Their conversations, though sparse, began to reveal snippets of his strange perception of the world. He observed human emotions with a detachment that was both childlike and profoundly ancient. "Why do they smile when their eyes are sad?" he once asked, pointing to a couple walking past the bookstore window. Eleanor, caught off guard, found herself explaining the complexities of human facade, the masks people wore. He listened intently, absorbing her words with a wisdom that suggested he had studied such nuances for millennia. One rainy afternoon, a young girl, no older than 7, wandered into the bookstore, lost and crying. Her mother had ducked into a nearby shop, and the child had become separated. Ellie, with her usual blend of firm kindness, knelt to comfort her, but the girl was inconsolable. Lysander, usually a distant observer, approached silently. He knelt too, and without speaking, extended his hand. In his palm, a single dew-kissed lily, impossibly white and fragrant, seemed to materialize out of thin air. The girl's tears stopped, replaced by wide-eyed wonder. She took the flower, her small fingers closing around its stem, her sobs turning into a soft sniffle. Lysander then gave her a gentle, reassuring smile, the first real smile Ellie had seen from him, and it was breathtaking, transforming his austere features into something radiant and deeply compassionate. The little girl, mesmerized, clutched the flower, and soon, with Ellie's help, was reunited with her frantic mother. Later, Ellie cornered him. "Lysander," she said, her voice low, a mix of awe and frustration. "Where did you get that flower? There are no lilies in this city, especially not in full bloom in autumn." He looked at her, his expression returning to its usual placid reserve. "It simply appeared," he said, his voice a low whisper. "A small gift for a small sorrow." He met her gaze, and in his eyes she saw not deception, but a profound truth that defied explanation. He knew she had the ring, He knew he was different, and a part of him, she realized, was testing her, seeing how much she would accept, how much she would believe. The air in the room crackled with unspoken magic, a secret world on the precipice of revelation. Her heart, once encased in ice, felt a slow, undeniable thaw. She was falling, not for a stranger, but for the impossible. Chapter 4. Echoes of Power. The Lily incident cracked open the carefully constructed wall around Eleanor's skepticism. She couldn't deny what she had seen, the sheer impossibility of the flower, the way Lysander's presence seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. She began to observe him with a new intensity, noticing the subtle shifts in the air around him, the almost imperceptible way light seemed to bend towards him, the peculiar stillness that often accompanied his movements. Her heart, which had been stubbornly resistant to any form of vulnerability, now felt a constant thrum, a mix of apprehension and exhilaration. She still kept the ring hidden, a silent challenge between them, a secret she both guarded and yearned for him to acknowledge. One particularly blustery evening, a severe storm swept through the city, shaking the old building to its foundations. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a banshee. Suddenly, a violent crack of thunder split the air, followed by a blinding flash of lightning that struck the power lines nearby. The entire block plunged into darkness. A collective gasp rose from the neighborhood, quickly followed by shouts and frustrated sighs. Ellie, navigating by memory, lit a few candles, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. The sudden darkness, usually a comforting blanket, felt ominous tonight, amplifying the sound of the storm. A faint, acrid smell of ozone filled the air. She checked her phone. No signal. The old building's wiring, she knew, was temperamental. As she moved to check the circuit breaker in the hallway, a loud, rending crash echoed from downstairs. The building groaned, a deep, unsettling sound. Then, a sickening, splintering noise, followed by a rush of cold air. A branch from the ancient oak tree in the courtyard, undoubtedly weakened by the storm, had fallen, smashing through the main support beam near the entrance, directly above the gas line. The smell of gas, faint but distinct, began to permeate the stairwell. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Ellie. This wasn't just a power outage. It was a genuine danger. "Lysander," she called out, her voice tight with urgency. He was by the window, his form a dark silhouette against the tumultuous night sky. The tree fell, and I smelled gas. Without a word, he was at her side. His eyes, usually so reserved, were now alight with an inner luminescence. Reflecting the distant lightning flashes, he inhaled deeply, confirming the danger. His jaw tightened. "The support beam," he murmured, his voice laced with an unfamiliar authority. "It must be secured immediately." "But how?" Ellie felt a surge of helplessness. "We can't just fix it. We need help. But the phones are dead, and the storm—" Lysander didn't answer. He simply moved. He walked purposefully towards the stairwell, his presence radiating an intensity that made the hairs on Ellie's arms stand on end. As he descended, the flickering candlelight seemed to dim around him, swallowed by an aura of raw, untamed power. Ellie followed, fear warring with an irresistible urge to witness whatever impossible thing he was about to do. In the dim, chaotic light, she saw the true extent of the damage. A massive segment of the oak tree had indeed shattered the main support beam, and a thin hiss, accompanied by the noxious scent of gas, confirmed their fears. People were beginning to emerge from their apartments, their faces pale with fear and confusion. Lysander stood before the wreckage, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He closed his eyes, and a palpable energy, like an invisible current, emanated from him. The air grew heavy, crackling with an almost audible hum. A faint, silvery glow began to outline his figure, intensifying with each passing second. Ellie watched, mesmerized, as tiny motes of light, like miniature stars, danced around him. The cold fear in her heart began to be replaced by a terrifying awe. Then, with a guttural cry that sounded ancient and powerful, he opened his eyes. They blazed with a fierce, otherworldly light, no longer stormy pools of sorrow, but brilliant sapphire flames. He extended his hands, palms open towards the splintered beam. A wave of force, invisible but undeniably present, slammed against the broken wood. It didn't just mend, it reformed. The splintered edges seamlessly knitted together, the cracks vanishing as if they had never existed. The wood, instead of appearing repaired, looked as if it had been perfectly carved, untouched by time or damage. The gas hiss abruptly stopped. The light around Lysander flared, then rapidly receded, leaving him breathless, staggering. The sapphire flames in his eyes died down, replaced by the familiar sorrow, but now tinged with exhaustion. He looked at Ellie, his breathing ragged, a sheen of sweat on his brow. The sheer effort of what he had done was evident. Silence descended, a profound, shocked silence that swallowed the sound of the storm. The few neighbours who had witnessed the impossible spectacle stared, mouths agape, terror and disbelief warring in their eyes. Ellie, however, felt something else, a cold, undeniable certainty. He wasn't just a man, he was more. A primal, exhilarating fear shot through her, but it was quickly eclipsed by a protective surge. He had saved them. He had saved her. Lysander swayed, his strength visibly failing. Before he could fall, Ellie rushed forward, catching him as his knees buckled. His head rested heavily on her shoulder, his body surprisingly light despite his height. She could feel his heart hammering against her chest, a frantic rhythm that matched her own. The residual warmth of his magic seemed to cling to him, a faint glow she could almost taste on the air. She guided him back up the stairs, her arms wrapped around him, supporting his weight. She didn't know what he was, but she knew, with an absolute clarity that chilled her to the bone, that her quiet, forgotten life was over. The ring, still hidden, suddenly felt like a heavy accusation. He had fallen from the sky, and he possessed powers beyond human comprehension. He was a god, or something very close to it, and now she knew. Chapter 5. The Oracle and the Intruder. The days following the storm were a blur of hushed conversations and wary glances from the neighbours. No one dared to speak of the impossible repair, but the memory lingered, a ghostly shimmer in their collective consciousness. Lysander, weakened by the exertion of his power, retreated into an even deeper silence. He spent most of his time resting, his gaze often distant, lost in some unknown realm. Ellie nursed him, bringing him food and tea, her touch gentle, her fear replaced by a fierce protectiveness. She had seen his true nature, or at least a glimpse of it, and it hadn't driven her away. Instead, it had anchored her, binding her to him in a way she couldn't explain. She still hadn't revealed she possessed the ring, the weight of that secret now almost unbearable. One afternoon, as Lysander was slowly regaining his strength, he looked at her, his eyes holding a profound sincerity. "The ring," he whispered, his voice still a little hoarse. "You found it." It wasn't a question, but a statement of undeniable truth. Ellie's heart leaped. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the shimmering, dark, gemmed band. She held it out to him, her hand trembling slightly. This is yours, isn't it?" He nodded, his gaze fixed on the ring with an almost reverence. "It is my anchor, my essence. Without it, I am diminished, a shadow of what I once was." It allows me to bridge the worlds, to hold my form here. He reached out, his fingers brushing the cool metal, but he didn't take it. His eyes met hers, and a flicker of deep emotion passed between them. Gratitude, but also a hint of something more, something akin to sorrow. You kept it safe. I didn't know, she murmured, feeling a sudden rush of guilt. I didn't know what it was, or who you were. It matters not, he said, his voice soft. You are good. You are pure. A rare light in this world. His words, simple and profound, sent a shiver down her spine. The air around them seemed to thicken, charged with an invisible current. Just as the moment deepened, a discordant chime echoed through the bookstore. The bell above the door, announcing a new arrival. Both Ellie and Lysander stiffened, their senses suddenly on high alert. A woman entered, a vision of ethereal beauty that seemed to steal the very light from the room. She was tall and slender, with cascades of silver hair that flowed like moonlight, and eyes the colour of a winter sky, cold and piercing. Her gown, a shimmering midnight blue, seemed woven from starlight itself. She moved with an imperious grace, every step a statement of undeniable power. Lysander, her voice purred, a melody laced with ice and honey. It has been too long, my love. Lysander rose slowly, his posture suddenly rigid, his face a mask of cold displeasure. Selene, he said, his voice devoid of warmth. What brings you to this realm? Selene's gaze swept over Eleanor, a chilling appraisal that made Ellie feel like an insignificant speck of dust. Oh, she drawled, a cruel smile playing on her lips. I see. You've been playing at being mortal, and found yourself a little plaything. Her eyes flickered to the ring in Ellie's hand, and her smile vanished, replaced by a look of sharp, dangerous possessiveness. And you have my ring. It is his ring. Ellie retorted, surprised by her own defiance, clutching the ring tightly. Selene laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a blizzard. Foolish mortal. You know nothing of our ways. That ring is not merely a trinket, it is a key, a conduit of power, and a symbol of our lineage. It binds Lysander to his duties, to his world, to me. She stepped closer, her icy gaze never leaving Ellie. Lysander and I are destined. We are of the same celestial blood, bound by ancient vows. Your fleeting, pathetic connection means nothing. Ellie felt a jolt of pain, a deep, unsettling fear at Selene's words. Ancient vows. Destined? Lysander remained silent, his face unreadable, torn between two worlds. The tension in the small bookstore was suffocating, thick with unspoken history and divine power. Selene radiated an overwhelming authority, a force that threatened to crush Eleanor's mortal spirit. I came, Selene continued, her voice hardening, because your extended absence has caused imbalance. The council demands your return, Lysander, and the ring. Her eyes, cold and demanding, shifted back to Ellie. Give it to me, little human. Before you truly understand the consequences of meddling with forces beyond your comprehension. Ellie's grip tightened on the ring, its cold metal now a symbol of defiance. She looked at Lysander, searching for a sign, a word, anything. His eyes, however, were clouded with a torment she couldn't penetrate. He was silent, caught between his past and the fragile present, between duty and a burgeoning forbidden emotion. Selene, sensing his hesitation, let out a frustrated sigh. Very well, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. If you will not return it willingly, I shall simply take it, and him. With a flick of her wrist, a shimmering silver tendril of energy shot towards Ellie, aiming for the ring. Lysander, finally breaking his silence, let out a furious roar. Selene, no! But it was too late. The tendril of power struck Ellie's hand, a jolt of searing pain coursing through her. The ring flew from her grasp, tumbling towards Selene. Lysander, eyes blazing with furious azure light, moved with blinding speed, interposing himself. He caught the ring mid-air, but the force of Selene's magic, amplified by his sudden intervention, threw him back, slamming him against a bookshelf. He crumpled, the light in his eyes dimming. The room seemed to ripple, a silent echo of the clash of divine wills. Ellie, clutching her throbbing hand, stared in horror. Selene, regal and triumphant, merely smiled, a cold, predatory glint in her winter sky eyes. The game had begun. Chapter 6. A Shattered Bond. The confrontation left an icy chill lingering in Eleanor's apartment. Far colder than the autumn air outside, Lysander lay sprawled on the floor, the precious ring clutched tightly in his hand, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. Selene, infuriated by his protective instincts, had delivered a blow that drained his remaining energy. Her silver tendrils of power had not physically harmed him in the way a mortal would understand, but they had severed his connection to his own essence, momentarily silencing his divine spark. She stood over him, an expression of grim satisfaction on her face, but also a hint of frustration at his unwavering loyalty to the mortal. Ellie rushed to Lysander's side, ignoring the stinging pain in her own hand. "What did you do to him?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. Selene merely arched a delicate eyebrow. "A temporary setback. He will recover. When he does, he will remember his true place, his true purpose, with me." Her gaze, sharp and disdainful, settled on Ellie. "You are a distraction, mortal, a fleeting amusement. He will forget you as quickly as he remembered the scent of rain. You don't know him." Ellie spat, her protective instincts overriding all caution. "He's not yours to command." Selene laughed, a hollow, mirthless sound. "Oh, but he is." "And you, little bookstore keeper, are merely a chapter in a much larger, grander saga, one you have no place in." With a final, contemptuous look, Selene vanished, leaving behind only the faint scent of ozone and starlight. Ellie knelt beside Lysander, tears stinging her eyes. He was unresponsive, his skin pale, almost translucent. The ring in his hand pulsed faintly, a desperate, fading beat. She took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his, trying to impart some of her own warmth, her own life into him. The silence of the apartment was suffocating, heavy with the weight of Selene's words. Destined, ancient vows, no place. Doubt, a serpent she thought she had vanquished, began to coil around her heart. What if Selene was right? What if Lysander, the celestial being, truly belonged to another world, another goddess? Days passed in a blur of anxiety. Lysander lay still, an ethereal statue, his spirit seemingly withdrawn. Ellie rarely left his side, her small world shrinking to the confines of her apartment, her focus solely on his slow, arduous recovery. She talked to him, reading aloud from his favourite books, hoping her voice, her presence, would guide him back. She held the ring close, feeling its fading pulse, knowing it was intrinsically linked to his very life force. The bookstore, her livelihood, suffered, but she didn't care, and nothing mattered but Lysander. Slowly, agonizingly, he began to stir. His eyes fluttered open, dark and confused. He looked at Ellie and then around the room, as if trying to piece together fragmented memories. The relief that flooded Ellie was so intense it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Lysander," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. He blinked, his gaze unfocused. "Ellie!" His voice was weak, raspy. He tried to sit up, a tremor running through him. She helped him, propping pillows behind his back. He looked at her, and his eyes, though still clouded, held a flicker of recognition. But something was off, a subtle shift in his gaze, a distant quality that hadn't been there before. "The ring," he murmured, his hand tightening around it. "It protects me, restores me." "Celine," Ellie began, wanting to explain, to warn him. "She came. She said—" He looked at her then, his gaze sharpening, but it was a cold, analytical sharpness. "Celine! Yes, goddess. She seeks my return." His words were devoid of emotion, a pronouncement rather than a memory. "My purpose is in the celestial realm, my duties, my destiny." Her heart plummeted, a lead weight in her chest. The words were familiar, an echo of Celine's cruel pronouncements. Had Celine's magic, in draining him, also wiped away his memories of their time together, of their growing bond, of the true feelings that had blossomed between them? He remembered his divine self, his duty, but had he forgotten her? The pain was a physical ache, a sharp, searing wound. He looked at her, his expression a polite blankness. "I thank you, Eleanor, for your kindness, for your care during my indisposition. I am indebted to you." His words were formal, distant, like a stranger expressing gratitude. It was then she realised the full extent of Selina's influence. He hadn't forgotten her entirely, but the emotional connection, the intimacy they had forged, seemed to have been erased, replaced by a cool, detached acknowledgement. He was once again the mysterious, silent figure from the night he fell, but now without the underlying vulnerability that had first drawn her in. A chasm opened between them, vast and terrifying. She had fallen in love with a lost god, and now that God had found himself again, he no longer recognized the love they had shared. He was a being of celestial power, his mind now attuned to his divine duties, his ancient world. Her human heart, once thawing, now felt as if it had been plunged into Arctic ice. He was Lysander, yes, but he was no longer her. Lysander. The dream, the impossible dream of a god and a mortal, seemed to shatter into a million glittering, painful fragments. Chapter 7. The Revelation and the Choice. Lysander's recovery was swift, but his emotional distance remained an impenetrable wall. He moved with a renewed grace, his eyes now often alight with a subtle power, no longer clouded by pain or weariness. Yet his interactions with Ellie were formal, courteous, but utterly devoid of the warmth and subtle intimacy they had once shared. He spoke of his celestial duties, of the council and the great balance, words that felt alien and cold in her cosy apartment. He was a god returned to his throne, even if that throne was still abstract, a distant memory. The man she had sheltered, helped and fallen for, had vanished, replaced by a being of immense power whose heart seemed miles away. One evening, as he prepared to leave, a quiet air of finality hanging between them, Ellie confronted him, her voice trembling but firm. "You're just going to leave?" she asked, tears blurring her vision. "After everything? After what we—" He turned, his gaze unreadable. "My purpose calls me, Eleanor. My absence has created ripples, and I must return to my rightful place. It is a matter of cosmic order." He held the ring in his hand, its dark gem now pulsing with a steady, strong light. "This is my key, my conduit. With it, I can reclaim what I have lost and return to my realm." "And what about us?" she pressed, her voice breaking. "What about me?" He looked at her, his expression softening almost imperceptibly, a fleeting echo of the Lysander she knew. "You are a kind soul, Eleanor, a beacon of goodness in a world that often lacks it. I am forever grateful for your compassion. But our worlds are not meant to intertwine. It is a truth I must accept. and one you must too. Just then, a shimmering portal, like a ripple in water, began to manifest in the centre of her living room. The air crackled, the bookshelves vibrated, and the scent of ozone intensified. Celine, regal and triumphant, stepped through, accompanied by two imposing, silent figures draped in silver cloaks. Her eyes, filled with cold satisfaction, fell on Lysander. "Lysander," she purred, her voice dripping with possessiveness. "The council awaits. It is time." She then looked at Eleanor, a sneer twisting her perfect lips. "As I said, little mortal, his world is not yours." Ellie felt a surge of desperate defiance. She wouldn't let him go, not like this. Not with her memories, their moments, erased or ignored. "No," she cried, rushing forward. "He remembers. He has to. Lysander, the lily, the storm, the night we met." She grabbed his arm, her human touch a stark contrast to the divine energy swirling around him. "Don't you remember? The kindness, the laughter, the silence we shared. It was real." He looked at her, his eyes warring between the cold, logical demands of his divine memory and the sudden, vivid flashes of human warmth her words evoked. A tremor ran through him. Celine watched, her face tightening, sensing a crack in her carefully constructed oblivion. "The council awaits, Lysander," Celine repeated, her voice sharper, more insistent. The cloaked figures stepped closer, their presence radiating an undeniable authority. Lysander looked from Celine to Ellie, his eyes troubled. He saw her earnestness, the genuine pain in her gaze, and a memory, like a faint echo, pierced through the haze Selene had cast upon his mind. He remembered her touch, her unwavering kindness, the quiet strength that had drawn him in. He remembered the feeling of her hand in his as she guided him from the storm, the way her laughter had chased away the shadows in his heart. It was a faint spark, but it was there, a stubborn ember beneath the ash. "My duties," he murmured, his gaze falling upon the ring, its glow now intensifying, a reflection of the battle within him. "My people." The balance. Ellie, sensing a fragile connection, pressed on. "What kind of balance is it if it means sacrificing your own heart, your true self? Is that what your world demands? To be hollow?" Celine's face twisted in fury. "Silence, mortal! You speak of things you do not comprehend." She stepped forward, an arc of silver energy gathering in her palm, aimed at Ellie, but Lysander moved faster. He stood between them, shielding Ellie, his hand raised. A golden light, warm and protective, erupted from him, deflecting Celine's attack. His eyes, now blazing with a mixture of azure and gold, fixed on Celine. "Enough, Celine. I will not allow you to harm her." His voice was deep, resonant with newfound power and conviction. Celine stared, her icy composure finally cracking. "You defend a mortal? After all we are. After all you are destined to be." "Destiny is not always immutable," Lysander said, his gaze unwavering. He looked at Ellie, and this time the warmth in his eyes was unmistakable, a direct, undeniable recognition of their shared past, their burgeoning love. "My heart remembers." He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. The contact was electric, a jolt of truth that sealed their bond. Then, turning to Celine and the cloaked figures, he made his choice, his voice echoing with the full, restored power of his divine essence. "I will return to my realm. I will face the council, but I will do so on my own terms, and I will not forget the love I have found here. It is as much a part of me as any celestial duty." His words were a direct challenge to the ancient laws, a defiant declaration of a god's love for a mortal. The air thrummed with the weight of his decision. Celine's face was a mask of furious disbelief, her plan unravelling before her eyes. The consequences of his choice, Ellie knew, would be immense. But in that moment, holding his hand, she felt a strength she had never known, an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of impossible love. Chapter 8. The Celestial Trial. The departure was swift and dramatic, with a final, resolute look at Eleanor, a silent promise in his eyes. Lysander stepped through the shimmering portal, Selene and the cloaked figures following, their expressions ranging from fury to stoic disapproval. The portal shimmered, then vanished, leaving Ellie standing alone in her living room, the lingering scent of ozone and starlight the only proof it had ever happened. The silence that descended was absolute, crushing. He had remembered. He had chosen to defend her, to acknowledge their bond, but he had still left. The pain of separation, sharp and profound, settled deep in her chest. Days turned into weeks, each one a relentless cycle of longing and fear. Ellie reopened her bookstore, attempting to find solace in the familiar rhythm of her life, but the magic had been irrevocably woven into her existence. Every customer seemed bland, every book seemed to lack the depth of the story she was living. She replayed Lysander's words, his defiant gaze, his hand in hers. "My heart remembers." But what did that mean for them, for a god facing a celestial council and a mortal left behind? News of strange occurrences began to ripple through the human world. Unusual weather patterns, unexplained power surges, brief, localized shimmering phenomena in the sky. These weren't isolated incidents. They were connected, a subtle disruption in the fabric of reality, a consequence of Lysander's cosmic struggle. Ellie knew, with a chilling certainty, that his trial was not merely a matter of words and ancient laws. It was a battle that resonated through both their worlds. One bleak afternoon, a figure appeared in her bookstore, unannounced. It was Selene, her silver hair loose, her eyes colder than ever, yet with a subtle undercurrent of desperation. She wasn't dressed in her usual celestial finery, but in simple, elegant human clothes, though her presence still commanded the air. "He chose you," Selene stated, her voice devoid of its usual mocking tone, replaced by a bitter resignation. "Foolish, utterly foolish." He declared his devotion, his love for a mortal, before the entire council. It was unprecedented, a sacrilege. Ellie's heart leaped, a mix of fear and wild hope. He did, yes, and now he faces the consequences, Selene said, her gaze hardening. "His powers have been restricted, his title stripped. He is condemned to a lesser existence, cut off from his true essence, forever bound to the mortal realm. An outcast." There was a perverse satisfaction in Selene's words, yet also a hint of something deeper, a profound loss, perhaps, of what she believed was hers. "And even so, he refused to renounce you. His stubborn loyalty is baffling." "Condemned," Ellie whispered, her blood running cold. "To this world? With restricted powers?" "Precisely," Selene confirmed, a faint, cruel smile returning to her lips. "And what good is a god without his divinity? He is no longer the powerful being you glimpsed. He will be less vulnerable. And you, Eleanor, will find that a weakened god is a heavy burden." She paused, her eyes piercing. He has chosen a mortal life, or what little semblance of one he can have. But there are still those in our realm who believe this transgression must be rectified, who believe a true God cannot be bound by such trivial affections. "What are you saying?" Ellie demanded, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. "I am saying," Selene replied, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "that his life here will not be easy. The celestial realm has its ways of reminding its errant members of their true place, and some consequences are permanent, even for a god." She looked at Ellie, a challenge in her gaze. Can you truly protect him, a fragile mortal, against the wrath of the heavens? Or will your human frailty be his ultimate downfall? Selene left as abruptly as she arrived, leaving Ellie reeling. Lysander was exiled. He was here, in this world, but he was diminished, vulnerable, and he was still in danger. The thought of him, stripped of his power, facing the subtle yet pervasive threats of a world that didn't understand him, filled her with a fierce, unwavering resolve. She had wanted him to choose her, to remember their love, and he had. Now, she had to choose him, completely and without reservation. She had to fight for him, protect him, just as he had protected her. Her bookstore, usually a refuge, now felt too small, too passive. She knew nothing of divine politics, of celestial threats, but she knew Lysander. She knew his goodness, his quiet strength, the profound sorrow in his eyes. He had chosen a life with her, however imperfect and dangerous it might be, and she would move heaven and earth if she had to ensure that choice was not in vain. The cynical girl who had lost faith in love was gone, replaced by a woman consumed by a love so powerful it defied logic, defied worlds. Her heart, once encased in ice, now burned with a fierce, protective flame. She would find him. She would save him. Chapter 9. Love's Crucible. Eleanor's quiet life was now a whirlwind of frantic investigation. Armed with Selene's cryptic warnings, she immersed herself in forgotten myths, ancient folklore, and conspiracy theories, searching for any clue about celestial exiles, divine curses, or hidden dangers. She haunted libraries, pored over dusty texts, and sought out eccentric academics, desperate for any information that could help her protect Lysander. Her bookstore became a base of operations, its shelves no longer just holding stories, but potential weapons in an otherworldly war. Her resolve was absolute. Lysander had risked everything for her, and she would do the same for him. Meanwhile, Lysander, now a fallen god in the mortal realm, struggled with his new existence. Stripped of most of his celestial power, the world felt harsh and dull. The vibrant tapestry of divine energy he once perceived was now muted, his senses dulled. The ring, though still anchoring him to a human form, no longer pulsed with its full strength. He felt the constant pull of his true home, a phantom limb ache in his soul. But the memory of Eleanor's unwavering love, her passionate defence, anchored him to this world. He remembered everything now. The moments of quiet intimacy, the shared silences, the way her laughter had warmed his ancient heart. He had chosen her, and he would not regret it, even if his new life was one of profound loss. He found himself a solitary existence, drifting from city to city, trying to understand the human world through new, vulnerable eyes, always careful to remain unseen, a ghost in the bustling crowds. One day, as Ellie was poring over an obscure text about ancient deities, a faint shimmer appeared in the corner of her store. It was a subtle, almost invisible distortion in the air, but she recognized it instantly. A message, perhaps. Her heart pounded. She reached out, her fingers brushing the shimmering light. A vision flooded her mind. Lysander, weaker than she had ever seen him, surrounded by an oppressive, suffocating darkness, a shadow that seemed to feed on his dwindling essence. He was in danger, targeted by unseen forces, subtle agents of the celestial realm, intent on erasing his existence as a reminder of his defiance. The vision faded, leaving her breathless, a cold dread twisting in her stomach. She had to find him, and now, drawing on an instinct she didn't know she possessed, she followed the faint, ethereal trail left by the vision, a faint whisper of magic that only she, now connected to Lysander through the ring and their bond, could perceive. It led her out of the city, through winding roads, into the remote, forgotten countryside, towards an ancient, overgrown forest shrouded in perpetual mist. The journey was perilous, fraught with hidden dangers, but her determination burned brighter than any fear. She found him in a clearing, beneath a gnarled, ancient oak, its branches reaching like skeletal fingers towards a bruised sky. Lysander lay on the moss-covered earth, barely conscious, the oppressive darkness from her vision now swirling tangibly around him, leaching the very colour from his skin. The ring on his finger pulsed erratically, its light flickering, threatening to extinguish. He was fading, succumbing to the subtle, slow death inflicted by his former realm. "Lysander!" she cried, rushing to his side. She knelt, cradling his head in her lap, her hands tracing the sharp planes of his face. His eyes fluttered open, dark and unfocused, but recognised her. A faint, sad smile touched his lips. "Ellie?" he whispered, his voice barely a breath. "You came." "Of course I came," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You idiot. Did you think I'd let you face this alone?" She pulled the ring from his finger, her own hand stinging as she did so. "You need your strength back. You need your connection." She knew what she had to do. The legends spoke of a binding, a willing sacrifice, a merging of essences. "No," he rasped, understanding her intent. "It is too dangerous. Your life force, it is too much." "I don't care," she declared, her voice firm, resolute. "We are bound, Lysander. Our love is real, and it is strong enough to defy even the gods." With a fierce determination, she pressed the ring into her own palm, a sharp, searing pain shooting through her as the metal seemed to bond with her skin. She closed her eyes, focusing all her will, all her love, all her very being into one desperate act. A blinding light erupted from her, a wave of pure, unadulterated human love and defiance. It clashed with the oppressive darkness around Lysander, pushing it back, consuming it. The ancient oak above them seemed to hum, responding to the surge of raw energy. The ring on her hand pulsed with an incandescent glow, channeling her human essence into Lysander, merging their spirits, bolstering his weakened core. It was a powerful, symbiotic bond, a defiance of celestial law. Lysander gasped, his body arching as a new strength, a fierce, human warmth surged through him. The darkness recoiled, shrieking silently, then dissipated completely. His eyes snapped open, blazing with renewed power, but now a power tempered by human emotion, by the sacrifice of the woman he loved. He sat up, grabbing her hand, his gaze locked with hers. The ring, now humming with their combined energy, was no longer just his anchor. It was theirs. "Ellie," he breathed, his voice rich with emotion, tears welling in his own eyes. "What have you done?" "I saved you," she said, her own strength now a little shaky, but her heart full. "We saved each other." The bond between them was palpable, a vibrant thread connecting their souls, an undeniable truth that transcended realms, destiny, and the decrees of any celestial council. They had faced the crucible of love and emerged, not unscathed, but undeniably stronger, forged into something new, something unbreakable. Chapter 10. The Unseen Kingdom. The forest hummed with a renewed, vibrant energy, a testament to the powerful exchange that had occurred beneath the ancient oak. Lysander, now fully restored, yet transformed, held Eleanor's hand, the ring on her finger pulsing gently, a constant reminder of their intertwined destinies. He was no longer just a god, he was a god who understood, truly understood, the fragility and fierce power of human love, for it was now woven into his very essence. His celestial power, though no longer boundless, was now deeply connected to the mortal realm, drawing strength from the very world he had once viewed with detached curiosity. They stood there for a long time, the only sound the soft whisper of the wind through the leaves. The world had shifted, not just for them, but subtly, imperceptibly for everyone. The celestial balance, once rigid and unyielding, now contained a new powerful variable: human love. Lysander broke the silence. The council. "They will not pursue us here," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "Not directly. My essence, now intertwined with yours, with this world, makes me difficult to reclaim without disrupting the fabric of reality itself. I am bound here, to you, in a way they cannot easily undo." "So, what now?" Ellie asked, a faint smile playing on her lips, her heart brimming with a joy she once thought impossible. "A god and a bookstore owner. Sounds like a title for a very niche romance novel." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes, chasing away the last vestiges of his ancient sorrow. "We build a life, Eleanor, a life beyond the stars, yet rooted firmly in this earth. We navigate the unseen dangers. Yes, for there will always be those who resent this new balance, but we do it together." They returned to the city, to Ellie's bookstore, their shared sanctuary. Their life was not one of quiet domesticity. Not entirely. Lysander, now with a unique blend of celestial and mortal wisdom, continued to subtly protect the city, sensing threats both mundane and otherworldly, using his tempered powers to maintain a quiet equilibrium. He was no longer the aloof, silent god, but a gentle, observant partner. Forever fascinated by the nuances of human emotion, he learned to appreciate the simple joys, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the laughter of children, the quiet comfort of a shared meal. Ellie, in turn, embraced her new reality with fierce enthusiasm. Her cynicism had dissolved, replaced by a radiant hope. She continued to run her bookstore, but now it was also a place where whispers of magic occasionally brushed against the mundane. She helped people, not just with books, but with silent advice, a knowing glance, a quiet strength that seemed to emanate from her, a reflection of the extraordinary love that now defined her. She found that her own senses had sharpened, a subtle intuition guiding her, a legacy of her bond with Lysander. Their love story wasn't without its challenges. The lingering presence of Selene and other celestial factions meant constant vigilance, subtle interventions, and the occasional desperate flight. There were moments of fear, moments of doubt, moments when the weight of their unique existence threatened to overwhelm them, but each challenge only deepened their bond, forging it into something stronger, more resilient. One evening, years later, they sat by the window in their apartment, the city lights twinkling below like scattered stardust. The ring on Ellie's finger pulsed with a soft, steady light, a silent testament to their unbreakable connection. Lysander held her hand, his thumb tracing gentle patterns on her skin. "Do you ever miss it?" Ellie asked softly, gazing at the distant stars, imagining the celestial realms he had forsaken. "Your old world." He turned to her, his eyes still stormy, now filled with a profound peace and boundless love. "I carry it within me, Eleanor, but my true world, my true home, is wherever you are." He leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "You taught me that love is not a weakness, but the greatest power of all. It is the only force strong enough to bridge the divides of worlds, of destinies, and even of gods." The quiet hum of the city, the soft glow of the moon, the warmth of his hand in hers, it was all they needed. Their love, born from a fallen star and a cynical heart, had not only saved a god, but had redefined what it meant to be divine, proving that the most profound magic often lay not in grand